Welcome to Sakshi TV's special immigration talk show with attorney Mr. Chan Parvathaneni from Managing Attorney of Sim Parvathaneni and Brown. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 4 immigration shows every week. On Tuesdays with lawyer Srinivas Kaveti, on Wednesdays with attorney Ms. Prashanti Reddy in English, on Thursdays with Mr. Chan Parvathaneni, and on Fridays with Banu and Indra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the information provided on the show is not a legal advice and for general information purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for the use of information. If you need any specific legal advice, you can definitely contact the attorney directly. Mr. Chan needs no introduction, but if you need any consultation, please log on to spblawfirm.com for contact information. When you consult with them, don't forget to mention Sakshi TV. From the beginning, spblawfirm.com site has provided a wealth of free information and online tools in the hands of immigrant community and for the benefit of US employers. The www.spblawfirm.com site provides you with the latest and cutting-edge information on US immigration laws and policies explained in terms that you do not have to be a lawyer to understand. So we will continue this knowledge session along with Q&A. If you need any specific advice, you can definitely again visit the website, that is svblawfirm.com site. So without any further delay, let's welcome Mr. Chan. Mr. Parvathaneni, I hope you're doing well.
Thank you, Shivani, and thank you all Sakshi TV viewers for joining in today.
Yes. So Mr. Chand, I was hoping, can you give us any latest immigration updates this week before we hop on to the topic?
Sure. So 2022 is coming to an end, and from a H-1B visa standpoint, so the main updates are that the consulate dates for visa stamping nowadays are being available. 1-2 months back, things were very bad. Nobody was getting proper slots, the visa slots. Lately, the consulates are doing all they can to increase the slots, and looks like many people are now able to get slots. So anybody that's looking out for visa interview dates, go onto their website, and more than likely, if you keep trying, you should be able to find some slots very soon. And this is for the H-1B slots. And another major change that we are seeing in H-1B adjudications nowadays is that recently USCIS is starting to crack on all the multiple registrations that were done during H-1B lottery. So what's happening is some people, I think, they misuse the system. They have done multiple registrations, and USCIS finally started to crack down on those multiple registrations. We are seeing notice of intent to deny or notice of intent to revoke for any of such cases where USCIS feels that the H-1B lottery process was misused. Other than that, I think the H-1B process, the H-1B adjudications so far have been very smooth this entire year. And 2022 is one of those years where the approval rate was very, very high compared to the previous years. We hope as we go into the 2023, we hope that the H-1B adjudications are smooth like what we have seen this year.
Yes, Mr. Chand. So Mr. Chand, I was hoping you can tell us a little about the recent updates. Well, my first question to you is, earlier this week there was the talk that the H-1B process would change in 2022 and many new rules will come into effect. So can you tell us what major changes were in the H-1B approval and what all changed in the H-1B during 2022?
So at the beginning of 2022, so Biden administration, they were looking at a couple of important H-1 items in the H-1B process. There was a talk that Department of Homeland Security, they wanted to publish a regulation on modernizing the H-1B requirements and changing a couple of things. Some parts of these proposed rule changes were a little bit controversial and sounded like litigation would be a possibility. And one of the speculated changes was that USCIS, they would revisit the employer-employee relationship. So USCIS recently changed the employer-employee relationship a couple of years back. They changed their entire prior memos. The prior memos got rescinded, and they came up with a new employer-employee relationship. So one of the changes that was speculated earlier this year is that USCIS would revisit the entire employer-employee relationship. and make the H-1B adjudications a little bit more harder. Luckily, that change did not go through. And another speculated change was regarding specialty occupation. There was speculation that the definition of specialty occupation would be made more clearer, and the rule changes would make it more clearer. Nothing of that sort happened, so nothing changed in 2022, even though that was a proposal. And another proposal that looked like it could happen was a rule that stated that the H-1B lottery will be based on the wages. So anybody that pays high wage would be given more priority. So that was another speculation, but that also did not go through. And some fees changes, the USCIS fee for the H-1B process. So the fee change was also anticipated, but luckily there was no change, and the fees remains the same. And however, there was one change that did happen. So the change that did happen was to do with the ONET code changes. So ONET is the occupational code. So anytime anybody files a H-1B, we have to specify the occupation. And the occupational codes, they directly impact on how much salary one should pay the H-1B employee. So there was a major change, a major update on the ONET codes. So the entire ONET codes got revisited by Department of Labor, and in July of 2022, the ONET codes got changed. So right now, for example, software developer, database administrator, all of them have new codes, and these codes are important because these occupational codes are the codes that tell the employer the kind of salary they would need to pay their employee. And the reason for this change is because DOL was reacting to the labor market. We have so many new occupations. For example, a data scientist, a business intelligence analyst, a lot of these new occupations that reflect the market reality. So in order to reflect this market reality, USCIS changed the ONET codes, and accordingly, the salaries also got updated in 2022.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, according to you, how was the year of 2022 overall? Was it good, especially for the H-1Bs?
So when we got into 2022, so 2022 was the year where we saw a severe shortage of labor in the United States. Not only in IT field, but across every occupation, we had a severe shortage of labor. And luckily, USCIS reacted to the shortage, and USCIS approval rate for H-1Bs, it was one of the highest percentages in the last couple of years. The denial rate for the most recent fiscal year was only 4%. And if you look at the prior years, 2018, we had almost 24% H-1B cases denied. 2019, we had almost 21% of the cases denied. And what this means is, comparatively, 2022, it was an excellent year. The denial rate was very, very low. And USCIS encouraged the petitions as long as the petitions met the requirements, as long as the job is a bona fide job, the employees are qualified. As long as the requirements are met, USCIS pretty much approved the cases easily. They did not harass the employers with unnecessary RFEs. So the approval rate was very good. And in general, as long as the job is bona fide, we do expect the same kind of approval to continue even in 2023. And looking at the current rule changes, there is nothing major anticipated for 2023. So more than likely, there will not be any surprises for 2023. And we do anticipate the same kind of approval process even in 2023 as we get into 2023 in the next couple of days.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, can you tell us a little about how was the lottery process in 2022? And is this something? Was there any changes according to you from the past year 2021, and that were changed in 2022? How was the process?
So initially, in the beginning of 2022, USCI stated that they will have a different lottery registration process. And the talk was that initially they wanted to give selections based on the wages and not just any random selection. And so that caused a lot of concern with a lot of companies because every company is different. Some companies have the resources. Some companies need to hire entry level people. Some companies need to hire senior level people. And there are different kinds of requirements for different kind of companies. So when USCIS announced that their lottery process will be based on the wages, the salary that a company would give, and not just a random selection, it caused a lot of concern. And every employer has different kind of a requirement. And there was a lawsuit filed in 2021 on this issue, late 2021, and courts vacated the rule. And USCIS initially announced that they will fight that court order, but eventually they did rescind the rule, and they did go with the random selection. So what finally happened was that they did go back to the old way. They did select through the random lottery selection, and it was just same kind of a lottery. However, we had one change. So the prior years we had multiple lotteries. For example, last year, 2021, we had 3 rounds of lottery, and the year prior to that we had 2 rounds of lottery. However, in this year, 2022, USCIS had only 1 round of lottery, and all the beneficiaries were selected in the first lottery. So there was no second lottery, there was no third lottery, and in a way, it was a very efficient way of doing things. And going into the future, into 2023, at this point of time, we are not really sure, but definitely this year it was a smooth process, and they finished all the selections in a single round, and the process was pretty smooth.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, can you tell us what exactly is in the visa waiver interview and for the H-1Bs? And also, is this something new in 2022 that also, sorry, is this something new in 2022? And also, are the employees going from visa stamping in India for getting the H-1Bs easily available due to the interviews?
Right. So, in general, anytime somebody is in India on basically having an H-1B approval, either somebody is having an H-1B approval for the first time, or somebody from US going to India while they're on H-1B. Normally, they need to go to the US consulate and get a H-1B visa. So they have to go through the stamping process, and the stamping process is cumbersome. And it takes a long time. It takes time to get slots, and it's a cumbersome process, even for the Department of State, because they have to conduct interviews, and they have to look at open slots and so on. And luckily, what happened in 2022 is that Department of State, they stated that they are going to get rid of interviews for at least most of the people. And what they said is, if anybody had a US visa in the past, any kind of a visa, whether it's an F1 visa, whether it's a B1, B2 visa, or even a H1B visa, any kind of a visa in the past, the consulates and Department of State, they stated that they will be given an interview waiver. So what that means is they still have to apply for a H1B visa. They still have to fill up the DS-160 application with the consulate, but they do not have to worry about going through the interview process. So the interview process is waived, and that has made a lot of things a lot more smoother. And the reason it is helpful is because the consulates have become very efficient, and the employees are able to get visas faster. However, it is not a guaranteed interview waiver for everybody, but in general, in case anybody that does not have any kind of a visa rejection in the past, any kind of a refusal in the past, these are the ones that are qualified, and majority of such people are getting visas through the Dropbox. It's called the Dropbox process. So they just drop in their passport, and they get a visa stamping. It did help a lot of people, because a lot of people were now able to get slots, now were able to plan travel to India, and now were able to quickly come back to US. So this has definitely decreased the delays. This has definitely increased the efficiency of the consulates, and most of the people who have been waiting for a very long time to travel to India because they're worried about getting a visa stamping, were now able to kind of use this interview waiver process and get their H-1B visas a lot more quickly.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, does one face any issues at the port of entry after they got their H-1Bs? Like, did you face or are you aware of the any recent issues at the port entry? Because we are hearing that there are a lot of times when people with H-1B visas are getting deported in the airports. Is that true?
So that is true, but it is very rare. So people do get deported at the port of entry at the airport. However, the percentage is very, very low. It is very rare, but it does happen time to time. Getting a H-1B visa at the consulate in India, it does not guarantee entry into US. So there is another step, and that other step is port of entry at the airport. And they have CBP officers, Custom and Border Patrol officers at the airport, and they are responsible for reviewing the non-immigrant employee who's entering into US, and they have to satisfy the officer that that person is going to comply with the regulations of their visa. So if somebody is coming on a B1, B2, they have to make sure they convince the officer that that is their only intent. Their intent is to come into the country as a tourist, return back before their time expires. If somebody is coming on H-1B, their intent should be to work for their employer, to work in the occupation, and make sure they're following all the H-1B regulations. So in general, what happens is the CBP officers at the airport, they typically look for any misrepresentations or any kind of a fraud. And if anything is wrong, there is a possibility that the person who's coming into the country could be deported. And we normally hear about such bad news from Chicago. Chicago is where we normally hear a lot of these incidents. And the general rule is even the officers, they're trying to do their job. They're just trying to make sure that there is no misrepresentation, there is no fraud in the visa. And in order to ensure there is no fraud or misrepresentation, the CBP officer can take the mobile phones, can take the laptops, and can search them if they suspect something is not correct. And normally, what happens is, in case uh, they prove that some kind of a misrepresentation happened, they prove that somebody is lying to them. That is when the deportations happen. So it is rare, but those unfortunate few times where somebody misrepresents some facts to the CBP officer, the deportations do. I mean, those people would be removed from US, and it is possible that these things happen. So it is very essential that anybody that is traveling into United States, even if they have a valid visa, they have to make sure they don't misrepresent any facts and they give only honest and truthful answers to the USCI, to the CBP officers that are interviewing them at the airport.
Yes, Mr. Chang, we're also, hearing that USCIS is tracking down companies that are filing for multiple visas, especially during the lottery season. So we're also hearing that the USCIS is revoking H-1B approvals for cases that are already processed. Is this true?
That is true. So this year, I mean, especially in the last 3 4 months, we are really seeing USCIS being very aggressive in cracking down on multiple registrations. So what happens is we have 85,000 H-1B slots, and sometimes what happens is some people collide together, or some companies do multiple registrations. And by doing multiple registrations, what's happening is the people that genuinely could have received the lottery selections, they are now being denied those lottery selections. And USCIS, they're really analyzing the H-1B registration data, and they are issuing notice of intent to deny or notice of intent to revoke, those kind of notices in cases where they suspect that somebody is committing fraud. So USCIS has a lot of data analysis tools. So they are able to analyze the data, they're able to analyze data patterns, and they can quickly tell if somebody is colliding with somebody to do multiple registrations. They are looking for patterns of data, and it is pretty easy. They are highly resourced, they have a lot of resources. So using their data tools, they can easily catch any kind of misrepresentation, any kind of multiple registration. So what USCIS has started doing is they are going after those companies, issuing these NOIDs or NOIRs to either deny those cases or revoke those cases. So The bottom line is one has to be very, very cautious. And we are only a few months away from the next lottery. We are only about 3 months away from the new lottery for the next year. So USCIS is going after multiple registrations. So just everybody should be extremely cautious. Everybody should be aware that USCIS will deny those cases and could come after those companies that do multiple registrations.
Yes, Mr. Chand, we did discuss this next question that that I'm going to ask in previous episodes. But is it also true that the USCIS workers are visiting the work sites of the employers, and that they're doing their random checks? Is it true?
That is true. So this whole site visit process, it is called administrative site visit and verification process. So this program started in 2009, but it is only in the last 5 years that we're really seeing a lot of these site visits. And it is true. So what happens is basically a US government officer, they will just come to the work site of the H-1B visa holder. So the H-1B visa holder is supposed to work at so-and-so place. All of a sudden, without any kind of prior announcement, the US government officer will just come to the work site, and they will start investigating. They will start asking questions about employment and so on, and they will take a look at the work site. So this kind of a work site visit, it is happening, and since 2017, we have seen a uptick in the number of such visits. And what the officers are trying to do is, all they're trying to do is make sure they look at the H-1B visa petition. They are looking at the information. They're trying to make sure that the employee as well as the employer, both of them are following the rules. The rules are very simple. One is supposed to work, and employer is supposed to pay them. And that is all they're trying to make sure. They're trying to make sure employee is working like they should in the occupation that was petitioned, and the employer is paying them the right salary. They're just trying to make sure that there is no benching and everything is as per the books. So these kind of visits are possible. Sometimes there are specific triggers that cause it. Sometimes it is just random. So whatever it is, the H-1B employers as well as the employees, they should always be prepared. And it's a very simple visit. I mean, nothing to worry. It does not really mean something is wrong just because the officer is on their doorstep. All that means is it's a chance to make sure everything is accurate, and then let the officer know about it. So overall, these visits are happening, but nothing much to be concerned other than to remember that one is always required to comply with the law.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, if one doesn't get, if one doesn't get their H-1B picked up in the lottery, what are some other ways that they can apply? And also, are there any exceptions for the lottery process?
So, in general, anybody to be on H-1B visa, they have to go through the CAP lottery system, generally. However, there are some exceptions. There are some exceptions where somebody could be on H-1B visa and not even go through the lottery process. So it is a very narrow exception, and the exception is given to some non-profit research organizations, to some universities, which are basically the institutes of higher education, or some government research organizations. So if some employer from such exempt places, so when I say exempt, somebody like University of Texas at Austin, for example, or some kind of affiliated organization. For example, a hospital that is affiliated with some medical school. So there are some exempt employers. So if anybody has a job offer from such employer, those employers don't have to go through the lottery process. They can directly file for the H-1B. It is called as a cap exempt H-1. It is called exempt because they're exempt from the lottery. So there are a few opportunities. So in case somebody does not get picked up through the lottery, they should always explore job opportunities at such employers. And the beauty is that they can get on H-1B. They can still be paid the regular salary that H-1B employees get, because they still have to go through the LCA process and so on. So the salaries are good. So people can explore the cap exempt H-1B option as long as they don't get selected in the lottery. So the cap exempt H-1B does have some restrictions. However, it is an avenue for people who do not get selected in the lottery.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, finally, can you tell us when exactly is the lottery going to come in 2023? Now that the year of 2022 is ending.
Right. So 2022 is almost ending, and it's already 2023, and the lottery will happen in March. So March is when the lottery will happen. So we don't have much time. It's very close, and we're already hearing about companies already starting the recruitment process. And because the companies are getting ready to file for their H-1Bs from March, and what that means is everybody should be ready. We don't know the exact process this year. More than likely, it will be the same process. The exact notification would come in the next month or so. We anticipate the actual notification coming out in February, sometime in February. So the rules will be more clearer in about 2 months. And in March, we will have the lottery. So in general, I think it's a time when everybody should make sure they're ready with their employers. The employers are ready with their employees. And there is not much time. 2 months. 2 months will fly by very fast. And it's already very close to the lottery time again.
Yes. And Mr. Chand, finally, are client letters and contracts still required to file the H-1B petitions in the year 2022?
So luckily in 2022, it was not mandatory to produce a client letter or a contract. So there was a new USCIS memo that came out recently, sometime back. And as per this memo, client letters and contracts are not required, and the employer can always use other additional documents to prove that a bona fide job offer exists. They don't have to show a client letter. In the past, 3 years back, it was mandatory. Without a client letter, we were getting a lot of denials. Nowadays, it is not mandatory, and that is great because a lot of companies they find it very hard to get a client letter because the clients feel it as a distraction. A lot of clients do not issue client letters. So luckily, that is not an issue anymore, and people are able to get approvals even without client letters in the current year. And more than likely, going into 2023, that is what is anticipated unless USCIS comes out with some kind of a rule change.
Yes. And also, Mr. Chan, can you tell us what are some of the common mistakes or issues that you feel that people had to go through in 2022 after applying for the H-1B?
So the main things during the lottery process, it is a typographical mistakes. So people have to be cautious that they're putting the date of birth correct because the US has a different format from the format we use in India. So minor things. So the main things are simple typographical mistakes. So people really have to make sure they put the right passport number, right name, right date of birth, and so on. And when it comes to the actual H-1B filing, make sure you are putting in all the documents, putting in your the degree certificates, the diplomas, the transcripts, the passport copies, the pay statements in case you're required to attach a pay statement, and so on. So overall, the process is simple. The only thing is the simple mistakes that could happen, the typographical mistakes, overlook. You forget to put your transcripts, you forget to put your I-20s, you forget to put your offer letters. So as long as people make sure the simple mistakes are not made, overall the process was very smooth last year. The approval rate was, this year the approval rate was very good, and we do anticipate the same kind of a scenario next year. The only thing is people have to be diligent. Just make sure you don't make any simple mistakes that you could have avoided if you just reviewed your whole application one more time.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chand. We did cover a very important topic. Thank you for the viewers for tuning in. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.